I have worked hospital security for 9 years, and I want to tell you something that nobody tells you before you take a job like this. Something that does not appear in the job listing and does not come up in the interview and is not covered in the 2-day orientation where they walk you through the badge system. They tell you about the hours. They tell you about the pay. They tell you about the rounds you will walk and the doors you will check and the visitor logs you will maintain at the entrance desk. They tell you that the job is mostly quiet, mostly routine, mostly a matter of presence rather than action, which is true, and they tell you that the night shift has a different quality from the day shift, which is also true, but which understates the situation so dramatically that it borders on dishonesty. What they do not tell you, what nobody tells you, is that a hospital at 3 in the morning is not the same building that exists during the day. It is not a quieter version of the same place. It is a fundamentally different place that happens to occupy the same physical structure. And the difference is not one of noise level or foot traffic or the number of staff in the corridors. The difference is something underneath all of those things. Something that the daytime momentum, the organized purposeful noise of hundreds of people working to keep other people alive, covers over the way music covers a sound you do not want to hear. At night, when the music stops, you hear the other thing. I want to be precise about what I mean when I say the other thing, because I am not a person given to vague language, and I am not telling you this story to be atmospheric. I mean the specific quality that accumulates in a building where people die at a rate that would genuinely shock most people if they saw the weekly numbers the way I see them. This is a 412-bed facility. On an average week, between 11 and 19 people die within these walls. Some of them are expected. Some of them are not. Some of them die in rooms surrounded by family, and some of them die alone in the middle of the night, with only the monitoring equipment for company and the night nurse who comes in afterward to handle the documentation. Over the 9 years I have worked this building, that number accumulates to somewhere between 5,000 and 9,000 people who took their last breath inside these walls, in these corridors, in these rooms that I walk past every single night between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I am not a spiritual person. I want to be clear about that. I do not have a framework of belief that accounts for what happens to a person after they die, and I do not have a strong opinion about whether anything happens at all. What I have is 9 years of walking these corridors alone at night, and a very clear sense that the accumulated weight of that many endings in one place does something to the place. Leaves something. Not a ghost in the story sense, not a presence with intention and personality, but something more like a residue. A thickness in the air of certain corridors at certain hours that you feel in the same wordless way you feel a change in barometric pressure before a storm. I have felt it every single night for 9 years, and I have made a kind of peace with it, the way you make peace with any condition of your environment that you cannot change and cannot leave. But the elevator is not the residue. The elevator is not the accumulated weight of the dead. The elevator is something with intention, and something with a pattern, and something that operates according to its own rules in a building where I am supposed to be the one enforcing the rules. And that distinction matters, and it is the reason that after 9 years I am still not at peace with it. I have never been at peace with it. I do not expect to become at peace with it. And I think on balance that the not being at peace is the correct response, and that any guard who told me they had made peace with the elevator would be someone I would be genuinely worried about. Let me tell you about the rules first, because the rules are the foundation of everything that follows, and because understanding the rules in their full context is the only way to understand what my nights actually look like, and what it actually costs to do this job correctly. The rules change how you move through this building. They change what you look at, and what you refuse to look at, and what you listen for, and what you do when you hear it. After 9 years, the rules are not something I consult. They are something I inhabit. They are as much a part of how I move through this building as breathing is a part of how I move through the world. But on my first night, they were a piece of paper. Every security guard who works the overnight shift at this hospital receives, on their first night, a printed document that is entirely separate from the standard employee handbook, separate from the HR paperwork, separate from everything official and institutional about this job. It has no hospital letterhead. It has no signature from anyone in administration. It has no date of issue, no revision number, no document control marking of any kind. It is a single typed page, slightly worn at the fold lines in the way that a document gets worn when it is folded and unfolded many times over many years. And it is handed to you by whoever is finishing the shift you are starting, passed from guard to guard in a chain that goes back further than anyone currently working here can trace. My predecessor, the guard I replaced, told me he received it from the guard he replaced, who had worked the shift for 11 years before a personal situation required him to move to days, and that guard told him the same thing about his predecessor. The document predates the current administration. It may predate the current building, which was substantially renovated in 1987. Nobody knows who wrote the original version. What everyone who has held this shift knows is that the document is updated periodically, that the updates are always additions rather than removals, and that every addition represents something someone learned and needed the next person to know. The current version has 12 rules. I am going to tell you all of them because I think all of them matter, and because I think the specific texture of all 12 of them together tells you something about the nature of what this building is at night that no single rule conveys on its own. Rule 1 says, always complete your rounds in the documented sequence regardless of what you hear in any other part of the building during your round. Finish what you started before you respond to anything. Rule 2 says do not use the elevator between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. under any circumstances. Take the stairs for any floor change required during this window regardless of urgency, and regardless of what you hear coming from inside the elevator shaft during this time. Rule 3 says the room at the end of the east corridor on the 6th floor, which appears on the floor plan as a storage closet and which has been painted over and does not have a functioning door handle, is not a storage closet. Do not attempt to open it, and do not stand outside it for more than the time it takes to walk past it. Rule 4 says if you encounter a patient in any corridor between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. who is not wearing a hospital wristband, do not attempt to guide them back to a room. Call the nursing station from the nearest wall phone and wait for staff. Do not touch the patient and do not ask them their name. Rule 5 says if you are on the basement level during your rounds and the elevator arrives at the basement without being called, leave the basement immediately using the stairwell at the north end of the corridor. Do not wait to see if the doors open. Do not look at what is inside the elevator car. Exit the basement and do not return to the basement level for the remainder of that round. Rule 6 says the security camera on the 3rd floor pediatric wing corridor shows static between 3:10 a.m. and 3:25 a.m. every night without exception. This is logged as a known equipment issue. Do not investigate it. Do not walk the pediatric corridor during this window. Wait until 3:26 a.m. to complete that section of your round. Rule 7 says if the elevator door opens on any floor during the 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. window and you are in the corridor at the time, turn away from the doors immediately. Do not look inside the elevator car. Do not speak. Do not respond to any sound that comes from inside the car, including sounds that resemble voices, including sounds that resemble your name, including sounds that resemble crying or distress. When the doors close, wait 60 seconds before continuing your round. Rule 8 says the chapel on the ground floor is always unlocked. If at any point during your shift you feel that you need to, you may sit in the chapel for up to 10 minutes. There is nothing in the chapel that will harm you. This is the only room in the building of which that can be said without qualification after 2 a.m. Rule 9 says if the display panel above the elevator shows a floor number that is not listed in the building directory, note the time in your personal log. Complete your current round without deviation, and do not discuss what you observed with day shift staff or with anyone in hospital administration. Rule 10 says, if you find the door to the basement stairwell open when you arrive at the basement level, and you did not open it, and you are certain no authorized staff member is currently in the basement. Do not go down. Complete the rest of your round and return to the basement at the start of your next round cycle. Rule 11 says some nights you will feel, in certain parts of the building, that there is someone standing close behind you. There will not be. Do not turn around. Continue walking at your normal pace. This feeling will pass within approximately 30 seconds in most cases and within 90 seconds in all cases. If it has not passed within 90 seconds, proceed to the chapel using the most direct road. Rule 12, the one I added, says if you hear your name spoken from inside the elevator car during the 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. window, do not respond, do not turn toward the elevator, and do not under any circumstances touch the call button or attempt to open the doors. Proceed immediately to the nearest stairwell, and do not return to the floor you were on for the remainder of the shift. The next shift guard should be informed only that there was activity during the window, using that phrasing exactly. Nothing more. I read these rules on my first night, and I want to be honest with you about my reaction because I think honesty here is more useful than performing a retrospective gravity I did not feel at the time. My reaction was skepticism with an undercurrent of something I was not willing to call anything other than caution. I am a person who trusts evidence and experience over instruction and belief, and 12 typed rules handed to me by a tired man at the end of a night shift did not constitute evidence of anything except a workplace culture that had developed some unusual traditions around a building that was, by the nature of its function, a place that made people uneasy. I categorize the rules as folklore, as the kind of thing that develops in any institution where people work alone at night with death, because death is the thing that the human mind is least equipped to rationalize away and most prone to elaborate around. I filed them in the appropriate mental category, and I went about my job. I followed them anyway, every single one of them, from the first night. And when I examine why, the honest answer is Ortega, the guard who handed me that page, whose name was Daniel Ortega, and who had worked this shift for 6 years before moving to a day position at a different facility. Ortega spent 30 minutes with me at handoff on my first night going over the desk procedures and the log system and the radio check in protocol with the nursing stations, all of it practical and efficient, the briefing of a competent professional. And then at the end of those 30 minutes, he took this folded page out of his shirt pocket, and he put it on the desk in front of me, and he looked at me in a way that I have spent 9 years thinking about. Not dramatically, not with any kind of performance. With the specific quality of a look that a person gives you when they are telling you something true, that they know sounds untrue, and they know they cannot make it sound true, and they are hoping that something in the delivery will carry the weight that the words cannot. He said follow them, and he left. And I followed them, because that look was not the look of someone sharing folklore. That look was the look of someone who knew. For the first 3 months, nothing happens. The elevator behaves like an elevator. It operates normally, mechanically, predictably, going to the floors where it is called and returning to the lobby when it is not in use. At night, when the building is quiet, I can hear the mechanism working in the shaft, the cables and the counterweight, and the soft pneumatic sigh of the doors, and all of it is ordinary and explicable and unremarkable. I do my rounds in sequence. I avoid the elevator during the window, which is easy because I have organized my round timing so that I am always on a floor with stairwell access at 3 a.m. I walk past the East Corridor 6th floor painted over door without pausing. I wait in the lobby from 310 to 326 to avoid the pediatric corridor. I follow the rules the way you follow any set of workplace procedures in the first months of a job, through habit and compliance rather than understanding. And nothing happens, and I begin to think that maybe Ortega was, despite his compelling delivery, passing on elaborate folklore after all. The first thing that happens is small enough that I almost miss it. It is a Thursday night in November, 4 months into my posting, and I am doing my 3 a.m. round on the 4th floor, walking the main corridor from the west stairwell toward the east end, clipboard in hand, checking doors. I am passing the elevator lobby, which is a small alcove off the main corridor with the 2 elevator doors facing each other. and I glance at the floor indicator panel above the left elevator the way you glance at things in your peripheral environment out of pure habit. Not because you are looking for anything specific, but because you are a security professional and peripheral awareness is part of what the job has trained into you. And what I see in that glance makes me stop walking so abruptly that my shoes squeak on the linoleum. The indicator panel above the left elevator is displaying a floor designation I have never seen before. Not a letter. Not a standard error code. Not a blank display or a dashed line indicating the car is between floors. A number B2. 2 characters, B and 2. The building directory shows 1 basement level, designated B1. The elevator button panel inside the car, which I have looked at during every shift since my first night, because I am a thorough person, has buttons for floors 1 through 9 and 1 basement button marked B1. There is no B2 button. There is no B2 on any directory, any sign, any floor marking in this building. And the position indicator on the panel, the small light that shows where the car currently is in the shaft, is showing that the car is at B2. Below the basement. Below the lowest acknowledged floor of this building. The elevator is sitting at a level that this building is not supposed to have. I stand in that corridor for what is probably 15 seconds, but feels considerably longer, and I do nothing because Rule 9 is running through my mind with a clarity that surprises me given how recently I had been treating it as folklore. Note the time. Complete your round without deviation. Log nothing in the official record. I note the time in my personal log 3C33 AM. I write it down while I am standing there because I want the timestamp to be precise and not reconstructed from memory later. And then I complete my round. Every door on 4, then the stairwell to 5, every door on 5, stairwell to 6, and I walk past the painted, over door on the east corridor of 6 with the particular quality of not looking that I have developed for that specific location. And I finish the round and I come down to the lobby, and I sit at the security desk, and I do not move from that desk until 4:01 AM. At 4:01 I get up and I look at the elevator indicator panel from the lobby. It shows L lobby. The car is sitting at the ground floor exactly where it should be, and the building is quiet, and the window is closed, and I breathe in a way that I realize tells me I have not been breathing fully for the past 28 minutes. I sit back down, I finish my shift. I hand off to the day guard at 6 AM, and I say nothing about what I saw because Rule 9 says do not discuss it with day staff, and because in that moment I am not entirely certain Rule 9 is folklore anymore. The next morning I come back to the building before my shift starts. I go to the building management office, which keeps the architectural records, and I ask to review the plans for the facility. The clerk gives me access to the plan files without much interest. I am a security employee with building access, and I spend 2 hours going through the complete architectural documentation for this facility. Original construction plans from 1961. Renovation plans from 1987. Every subsequent modification, every mechanical update, every infrastructure change that has been documented in the 40 years since the renovation. I am looking specifically at the basement level and everything below it, and what the plans show is this below B1, which is the documented basement level containing mechanical rooms, storage, the morgue, and the old maintenance corridors. There is foundation, reinforced concrete foundation poured directly onto bedrock. No sub-basement, no mechanical space. No room of any kind, and certainly no elevator shaft extending below the foundation line. The elevator shaft, according to the 1987 renovation plans, which include the current elevator installation, terminates at the B1 level. The pit below the lowest landing, which every elevator has and which is a standard safety and mechanical feature, is shown as extending 4 feet below the B1 floor level into the foundation concrete, and below that is bedrock. There is no physical space in which an elevator car could sit at a level below B1. There is nowhere for B2 to be. And yet the indicator panel showed the car at B2, and the position light showed it below the basement, and I am a person who trusts what I can see, and what I saw was unambiguous. I go back to the rule sheet that night, and I read Rule 9 again with the attention of someone who is no longer reading it as folklore. If the display panel shows a floor number not listed in the building directory. Not if this ever happens. If. Present tense conditional. written by someone who knew it would happen, who had already seen it happen, who was writing a rule for the next person who would see it happen. Because they were certain there would be a next person. The rule was written from experience. They all were. I understand this now in a way I did not 4 months ago, and the understanding settles into me with a weight that I recognize as the end of my skepticism. Not the beginning of belief in anything specific. Just the end of the comfortable position of dismissal. Over the next several months, I pay a different quality of attention to the elevator. Not surveillance, I do not stand and watch it. That would compromise my rounds, and the rounds are primary. Rule 1 is clear about that. But a background attention. A piece of my awareness allocated to tracking the elevator the way a ship's navigator tracks the weather while doing other navigational work. I note the nights when the indicator shows B2. And I note the time, and I discover the pattern that I think the guards before me must have known. The pattern that should perhaps have been in the rules but was not, which is this: it is always 3:33. On the nights when the elevator goes to B2, the indicator shows B2 at 7:33 a.m. Sometimes I catch it arriving at 3:33. Sometimes I catch it already there at 3:33 when I pass an indicator panel during my round. But the time is fixed, 3:33 a.m., every time. I also begin to notice that the nights when the elevator goes to B2 are not random. There is a pattern to the nights as well, though it takes me longer to identify because the sample size builds slowly, and because I am working from personal notes rather than official logs. The elevator goes to B2 on nights following a death in the building. Not every death, not in a simple one-to-one relationship, but there is a correlation that is too consistent to be coincidence, a clustering of B2 nights around deaths that occurred in specific circumstances, deaths that were unexpected, deaths that happened quickly, deaths where the gap between the patient being alive and the patient being gone was very short and very sudden. The elevator seems to respond not to death itself, but to a particular kind of death. The kind that does not have time to be prepared for. The kind that arrives before anyone is ready. I think about this for a long time, and I do not reach a conclusion. I note it in my personal log, and I add it to my private understanding of the building without attaching to it any framework of meaning. Because I am still not a person who has a framework for this kind of meaning, and I am not going to manufacture one. I simply note it as a pattern and I continue my work. In my 5th year, something happens in the basement that changes the character of the rules from a set of procedures I follow to a set of procedures I depend on. I am doing my 20:50 a.m. round on the basement level, which is the standard timing, early enough to be finished and out before the window opens at 3 a.m. The basement at this hour has a specific quality that is different from every other level in the building. The other floors have the residue I described earlier, the accumulated weight, but it sits in the air the way humidity sits in air, present but diffuse. In the basement it is different. In the basement it has a directionality to it, a quality of coming from somewhere specific rather than everywhere generally, and that somewhere is the south end of the basement where the old maintenance corridors branch off from the main corridor, and where the original 1961 construction is unmodified, brick walls and concrete floors and overhead pipes with no renovation layer covering them. I have walked that south end corridor every night for 5 years, and I do not like it, and I am not ashamed to tell you that because not liking it is the appropriate response, and any guard who told me they were comfortable in the south end of this basement after 2 a.m. would be someone I would be concerned about. I am at the south end doing my door checks, storage room 1, storage room 2, the old maintenance equipment room that has been padlocked since before I started, and I am turning to start back toward the north, and when the elevator arrives, I hear it before I see it, the mechanical sound of the car descending, cables working, and then the soft chime that this elevator makes on every floor when the doors are about to open. I hear that chime and Rule 5 activates in me the way a trained reflex activates. No deliberation, no decision-making process, just immediate movement toward the north stairwell. I am moving. I am not running because running in a hospital basement at 2:50 a.m. would be a thing I could not fully explain to myself afterward, but I am walking faster than my normal pace, faster than any pace I have used in 5 years of routine rounds. And I am not looking at the elevator. I am looking at the north stairwell door, which is visible at the far end of the corridor, and I am focused on that door with the focus of someone who has a single clear objective. The elevator doors open. I hear them. That specific sound of the doors of this particular elevator opening. A sound I know as well as any sound in my life, after 5 years of hearing it multiple times every shift. They open, and the sound of them opening changes the sound of the basement corridor in the way that any opening door changes the acoustics of an enclosed space. And in the changed acoustics, I am acutely aware of the quality of what is coming from inside the open car, or more precisely the quality of what is not coming from inside the open car, which is the ordinary sounds of an empty elevator, the mechanical hum, the circulation fan, the ambient noise of a car sitting at a floor. Those sounds are there, but underneath them or behind them or woven through them is something else. Something at a frequency that I feel in my chest before I consciously register it as sound. And walking away from it while feeling it in my chest is one of the harder things I have done in 9 years of hard things in this building. I am 10 feet from the stairwell door. I am 7 feet from the stairwell door. I am reaching for the handle and the sound comes. My name. From inside the elevator car. Spoken clearly in the quiet of the basement corridor with a specificity that strips away every remaining possibility of acoustic misidentification or auditory trick. Not a sound resembling my name. Not a frequency that my pattern-seeking brain is resolving into something familiar. My name. First name and last name. Spoken at a normal conversational volume that carries in the basement corridor acoustics with the unobstructed clarity of a voice in an empty space. And the voice that speaks, it is not a voice I recognize, and it is not a voice that I can characterize beyond saying that it is in the human frequency range, and that there is something in its quality that is wrong in a way I cannot specify. A wrongness in the production of the sound rather than in the sound itself, as if whatever is making the sound is doing so through a mechanism that is close to, but not identical to a human vocal apparatus. I stop walking for 3 seconds. I am aware of stopping, and I am aware that stopping is not what the rules say to do, and I am aware that the stairwell door handle is within my reach, and I stop anyway for 3 seconds, because hearing your name spoken in an empty basement at 20:50 in the morning by something inside an elevator that came down on its own is an experience of briefly override its even well-trained procedure. 3 seconds. And then I push through the stairwell door, and I go up the stairs, and I do not stop until I am on the ground floor, and I let the stairwell door close behind me, and I stand in the ground floor lobby for a full minute doing nothing, but regulating my breathing. I add Rule 12 to the document that night. I write it carefully, in the same flat practical tone as the other rules, because flat and practical is the right tone for information that someone needs to be able to receive and act on without the delivery interfering with the reception. If you hear your name spoken from inside the elevator car during the window, do not respond. Do not turn toward the elevator. Do not touch the call button or attempt to open the doors. Proceed immediately to the nearest stairwell. Do not return to the floor you were on for the remainder of the shift. Inform the next shift guard that there was activity during the window. Nothing more. I fold the page on the same fold lines it has always had, and I put it in my shirt pocket, and I carry it there for the rest of my shift, and I hand it to the guard, who comes on at 6 a.m., and I watch their face when they read Rule 12, and I tell them. When they look up at me, follow them. And I leave. There are things I have not included in the rules, because the rules are for information that can be acted on. Information that changes what you do in a specific situation, and what I am about to tell you cannot be acted on. It is simply true, and I carry it. And now I am going to give it to you to carry as well, because I have been carrying it alone for 4 years, and I think it should be known. I know what the elevator goes to at B2 on the nights following sudden, unexpected deaths in this building. I do not know this from going to C. I have never gone to C, and I am never going to go to C. I know it from the quality of the sound I have heard from the shaft on the nights the elevator sits at B2. The resonance I described earlier that I feel in my chest, and from a conversation I had 3 years ago with the oldest member of the current nursing staff, a woman named Ida who has worked this hospital for 31 years and who, when I described the elevator pattern to her one morning after a particularly difficult window night, looked at me with the recognition of someone hearing, confirmed something they have long suspected. Ida told me that in her 31 years she has noticed that in the hours following a sudden, unexpected death in this facility, particularly in the overnight hours, there is sometimes what she called a delay, a period in which the transition, as she put it, is not clean, in which whatever process is supposed to occur does not occur immediately or does not occur completely. She said she has no framework for this. She said she has simply observed it over 31 years in the way a practical person observes anything that happens repeatedly in their environment. She said the overnight security guards, over the years, have always seemed to know when these nights are happening. She said they seem to know it from the elevator. I have thought about what Ida said many times in the 3 years since that conversation. I have thought about the correlation I identified between B2 nights and sudden, unexpected deaths. I have thought about the voice in the basement saying my name in a way that was not quite right, in a way that suggested something working very hard to produce a sound it did not naturally make. I have thought about Rule 7, the instruction not to respond to sounds from inside the elevator that resemble voices, that resemble your name, that resemble crying or distress. Resemble distress. That word was chosen carefully by whoever wrote it. Resemble distress. Not threatening sounds. Not dangerous sounds. Sounds that resemble the sounds of someone who needs help. Sounds that would, in any other context in a building full of people who need help, require an immediate response from a security officer. The rules say do not respond. I follow the rules. But I want you to understand what following that rule costs on the nights when the sound from the elevator is not the resonance, not the low-frequency vibration, but something that sounds like confusion, something that sounds like a person who does not understand where they are, or why they are there, or why the things that are supposed to happen next are not happening. Something that sounds like someone alone at the bottom of a building that should not have a bottom, at a floor that should not exist, waiting for something or someone in the specific way that people wait when they do not yet know that waiting is no longer something they need to do. I keep my rounds. I follow the rules. I check the indicator panel at 4:01 every morning, and when it shows L I feel what I feel and I sit down and I finish my shift. 9 years. 3,300 nights approximately, accounting for days off and vacation. 3,300 times walking this building from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and 3,300 times sitting at this desk, and some number of those times that I could calculate from my personal log, but choose not to, watching the indicator panel show B2 at 3:33 and listening to the building and doing my job. I have updated the rule sheet once with Rule 12. I may update it again. There is something I have noticed in the past several months that I am still in the process of understanding, still accumulating sufficient data to be confident enough to translate into a rule, which is that the nights following B2 nights, the nights after the window nights, have a quality of their own that is different from baseline and different from the window itself. A quietness that is a different kind of quiet from the ordinary overnight quiet of the building. A sense of something resolved, something settled, that is in its own way as noticeable as the alternative. I am watching it. I am noting it. I am a person who trusts evidence and experience, and I am gathering both.